Deep within Kazdel, at the boning heart of the city, young Jarl stands before the most ancient of Sarkaz. Those Sarkaz who have seen the hatred of Terra for millennia and seen the once mighty Tikaz be reduced to the Sarkaz. They have suffered an existence of torture, constantly burning within the soul furnace to give those Sarkaz who still call Kazdel their home a source of heat and power. However, with Teresa and Teresa's having freed the Sarkaz from the hate of the myriad souls, it is time for a change in Kazdel. With the first Originium that once damned their race now in possession of the Sarkaz, it is time to free the revenants of their eternal damnation. However, they, like many, resist change. It is their hatred that has powered Kazdel from time immemorial, and even if it is a tormented existence, it is their tormented existence. So, an appeasement ritual is needed. The Liches had their own idea in mind, but faced with hopes and dreams of the Sarkaz before them, they began conjuring visions of alternate Kazdels. It is left up to Nymph to pulse these visions and guide these revenants and us the audience through the Sarkaz's Furnaceside Fables. Integrated Strategies 5 continues directly after the ending of a Kazdelian rescue. I'm not going to recap that here as what I told you in the intro is more than enough, but you can find that event on my channel if you would like to get a true primer for what we are talking about today. Regardless of your understanding or not, the fables that will be conveyed to us are in fact just that. Aside from the first ending, all the stories given to us in this event are just that, stories. Now, stories are powerful things, and delving too deeply into them is not entirely good for your health. This is, after all, a ritual to appease the souls of the restless revenants, and as such, the powerful Sarkaz witchcraft at work has some degree of dangers attached. However, with the Tin Men calming the anger of the revenants, it is possible for Nymph to take these scattered stories and transform them into fables for the revenants. If you take the time to read them, all of the notes have stories to tell. Some are simpler than others, and some have relevance to the stories of our endings. If you are looking for recommendations, pick anything that has to do with a doodle of hope. While not the deepest story out there, it does tell quite a compelling tale. The End is most certainly a fitting name for the first ending. I mean, it's literally the end. When Nymph travelled through the various encounters, she decided not to tamper with any historical events, allowing her story to play out as history did. Perhaps she believes that the history of the Sarkaz, although painful, is not something to be undermined with stories. Regardless, she doesn't get to wrap things up cleanly. She gets smacked by a furious Fremont. The Lich King is tired of youngsters sticking their noses where they don't belong, and steps in to remove them from the furnace. After beating them out of the illusion, Fremont berates Ermengarde for carelessly conducting the ritual before sending them all away. After the youngsters have been chased out, Fremont turns to the Tin Man. He needs to have words with the Revenant, and before departing the Soul Furnace, Fremont tells the Revenants that they should stop daydreaming and focus on making their dreams happen in reality. Returning following his meeting with Fremont, Tin Man meets with the Revenants again. He brought Colombian fast food all the way here for them to try it. I know those burgers are nasty by this point, but I suppose the all-consuming flames won't mind the taste. Setting down some metal toys, Tin Man tells the Revenants about his life. He asks them to lay down their resentments and join him as he walks across Terra. Leaving the furnace, happy with his old companions made new again, Tin Man heads for the convalesce of the Banshee. He has a bit more sightseeing to do before he returns to Columbia. His work is cut out for him though, and they cause plenty of headaches for Tin Man upon his return to Columbia. Although, with the promise of them traveling the lands freely, perhaps we'll have Tin Men walking across Terra soon. While technically the end of the story, there is more to tell in all of these Integrated Strategies endings. Through the end books, extra information unlocked by clearing the endings, we get some closure on other aspects of the story. Following their journey into the Furnace, all of our storytellers have been suffering from Furnace Syndrome. The stories they uncovered have altered something in them. Crowny seeks the underground city of Kazdel, while Nymph dreams of the flying city of Kazdel. One night, when Crowny was trying to drag Nymph into her search, Ermengarde appears before them and drags them back to the Furnace. Much to Fremont's annoyance, the Revenants want more stories. This time, though, he will be present to supervise things. If you want a basis for the endings we want to discuss beyond this, here it is. As time passes, the stories come to an end. One by one, the storytellers return to their own lives. Tin Man heads for Columbia. Kaśyñāna heads for Sammy, seeking a cure for the Naxxahur. Crowny returns to her work in Moat, making some drip for our operators. Mudrock constructs new buildings and farms, and Kazdel becomes a hub able to welcome infected of all races. Even the Faunus loses its revenants as the First Originium replaces them as the core of Kazdel. While there's a long way to go, Kazdel has somewhat become the country the Revenants dreamed of. Moving on to our second ending, Twin Crowns. It's built upon a simple change. When the twins Teresa and Teresis found the Sarkaz crown, instead of Teresis allowing Teresa to take the crown by herself, they instead shared that burden between them. It works out pretty well, as the Sarkaz civil war never happens. They basically become Rhodes Island and solve conflicts across Terra, but with a little bit more violence than usual. Okay, a lot more violence than usual. As such, there is never a need for Teresa to befriend Calcet. With that pivotal event never happening, the Doctor is never awoken. So it is Teresa who discovers Amiya following the death of her family. Even without the Doctor, Amiya loves those around her, and eventually leaves Kazdel to help infected across Terra. Without the Doctor, Euripides medicine development stagnates, and Amiya dies long before her time. War, disease, and famine have always stripped Teresa and Teresis of their companions, Ascalon, Touch, Fitzroy, and Erickson. But the passing of Amiya is a pain unlike all before. It is into this world when Nymph leads this ending. Arriving before the kings, Nymph and co are placed on trial. After passing their trial, the kings welcome their guests happily. They invite them to see the majesty of this utopian Kazdel, but the Revenants had seen enough. Nymph wished to see more and collapses under the strain of her efforts. Rushing to her side, the twins are unable to aid her. However, the Outblood King emerges from her staff. She had learned that the storyteller was trapped within the Faunus, and Amiya had come to rescue her. The kings look upon what their beloved Amiya could have become, and through the Sarkaz crown share the history that they had no time to explain. Pulled from the story, Nymph awakens within a Babel hospital. Upon awakening, Nymph reflects on the alternate Kazdel she saw, one free from suffering, where the Faunus had long become a water channel supplying the city with fresh water constantly. It leads her to lament the current existence of Kazdel. Amiya is by her side during this time though, offering constant reassurances about the future of Kazdel. When trapped in a dream of a better Kazdel, Amiya is the one to tell Nymph about the fate that awaited her in that universe. Within the world of the Twin Crowns, Teresa manages to save a young Amiya from the wreckage of her convoy after she was separated from Teresis by assassins. Upon return to Kazdel, she was treated and they discovered that her Euripides was so severe she only had 5 years to live. Regardless, the twins adopt her and raise her as their own. Eventually, she would leave the protection they offered behind. Yes, they brought peace to Terra, but did so through bloodshed. She, as a victim of war, could not abandon others to that fate. She managed to live to adulthood before succumbing to Euripides. Teresis, seeing how she lived true to her ideals of seeing Euripides cured, regretted that he would never be able to tell her he was wrong for dismissing her dream as a childhood fantasy. In that brief moment when the two worlds connected, the twins were able to see an Amiya that survived Terra, still holding to her noble beliefs. At the same time, Amiya could see the twins having reconciled their differences and walking towards a better Terra. When questioned by Nymph about their exchange, Amiya refuses to comment. However, the remnant of Teresa looks on with a smile. Following their meeting with Amiya, the twins learned of the one called the Doctor and sought them out. Descending into the depths of Kazdel, the two meet with Calcet, who has been their prisoner since our failed crusade against Kazdel. Using Civilite Eterna, they drag the information about the Doctor from her mind. Awakening the one known as Oracle, they seek their aid with curing Euripides, although Oracle responds to their query with a simple question. Where is Priestess? Spoiler alert, but they're not going to meet Priestess. They will, however, meet someone very similar to that, and we will get there when we get there. It will flow a lot better. And yes, we are going to be cutting these endings short just a little bit in order to spice up that last ending that everyone's here for. This time, instead of creating a path for the Twin Kings, the crew discover a horn. While seemingly a Sarkaz horn, it carried the scent of the Sancta. So this reality reflects a world where all the Sarkaz became the Sancta. Stumbling into a rift, Nymph finds a gun in the Faunus, and after firing it, the tale of the Sarkaz Sancta takes shape. Due to the law's intervention, Kazdel becomes the holy city. While under the effect of the story, all those present begin displaying the signs of the Sancta and feel the same empathy they do. With the group continuing onwards, the Revenants and Fremont prove incapable of removing them from the story. Eventually, they reach the holy city, and a familiar figure stands before them. Bold Rockesty stands at the head of the Gun Knights. Challenging these newcomers, the group manage to overcome him and are welcomed to the city. Before they pass the gates, Kaśjñāna appears before them and prevents them from entering Kazdel. Taking them to her camp, she reveals that all of Terra is united against the law. Ancients and elders, as well as those Tikas that rejected the law, have all formed up against this holy city. Kazdel might be a paradise, but it has turned all of Terra against it. The end books expand on this by giving us more context for the history of this patriot. Much like in proper history, the home of the Sancta is on paper a bastion of acceptance. Delegates go forth from the city to spread the good word. Those who wish to seek salvation enter the city through the Pilgrim's Gate. Countless visitors pass through the gate every year. Baldrocasty, as one of the Arknights, has protected the city for decades. He has tirelessly worked for the betterment of Kazdel, patrolling the perimeter, handing out food, and reporting daily to the Pope. In the past, many Arknights carried out his duty with him, but now most serve in combat squads. His adopted daughter Yelena speaks with him about the Astray, a group leading people away from the Fate. And yes, we are going to be using this OG Patriot and Frost Nova sprites because I don't want to keep using the CG that's on screen during this section. His own son Gravosiel has joined them, so even in this timeline, he's more progressive than his father. His daughter wishes to join the Arknights to serve alongside him, but as a Catus, she lacks Tikaz's empathy. He tells her that he will speak to the Pope on her behalf, but doubts that such a thing will be allowed. Outside of the Holy City, Originium encroaches on the Holy Land. Thanks to that, the Arknights avoid fighting close to where Originium is, and Kaśjñāna's forces can amass outside Kazdel. Nymph is being kept as a hostage. In the last few days, the others she was with have vanished from the story. With Kaśjñāna interrogating the Jarl, no one notices Baldrocasty approaching. He effortlessly overpowers Kaśjñāna and Monster before announcing his intentions. The Pope has dispatched him for Nymph. The meeting with the Pope was eventful, and leads the Pope to have a new revelation about the law. Originium is not a threat to Kazdel, and as such, he orders Originium brought into the city, with chaos spreading quickly as a result. In another tale, Nymph picks up a lotus petal. The petal moves the story eastward. Kaśjñāna was once the king of the Sarkaz. He hoped the east would prove to be a home for the Sarkaz. In true history, Kaśjñāna was betrayed by those who welcomed him and afterwards took his own life. This reality, however, avoids this. During his journey to the east, Kaśjñāna attains enlightenment. His people, this time alive and well, vow to share enlightenment with the rest of the Sarkaz and later the entirety of Terra. Thus, Nagara Kaśyñāna became the home of the enlightened Sarkaz, and the Anasa were born. Nymph, Modrock, and Tin Man encountered Kaśjñāna on their journey, and the Enlightened One sits down for a sermon with them. Although the discussion could not reach a conclusion, the group sit beneath a tree in meditation. Modrock was the first of the group to reach enlightenment, but becoming an Asa did not free her. In fact, it just made her question why the Sarkaz were born into suffering. No matter how many times she asks Kaśjñāna for answers to her questions, he never provides her with something to satiate her. Tin Man intended to act as a bridge between Revenant and Storyteller, however this story calls for his presence. He, as a Revenant, is unable to reach enlightenment. Despite the suffering of the Sarkaz that created them, he as a Revenant is already free. Nymph, meanwhile, struggles to understand that enlightenment requires abandoning the suffering of the Sarkaz. Kaśjñāna listens to all of their thoughts and invites them into Kaśyñāna. Perhaps this Kazdel may answer their questions. Traveling through the wasteland to their destination, Kaśjñāna guides the Sarkaz. A catastrophe rages around, causing Kaśjñāna to stop and comfort Nymph as the lightning strikes rain down. Nymph is surprised to see many Anasa along the path, as well as plenty of other races. Several shelters line the path they travel. They were once used to protect people from catastrophes. No doors, only windows. When questioned on the logic of this, Kaśjñāna says that one who traveled to his world from another should not question the lack of a door. Modrock asks him why he said they used to protect people from catastrophes, although the ringing of a bell puts a stop to our questions. They are returned to the Soul Furnace, and moments later, Nymph alone returns to Kaśjñāna's side. The bell's chime leads those who hear it to where they belong, and they have not rejected Nymph. As such, she may now enter Nagara Kaśyñāna. Between Jan, Ursus, and Victoria, the city of Kaśyñāna stands. An artificial oasis connects it to the rest of Terra. These chains of oases have become the safest and most reliable path, connecting the three nations, and are called the Inasa Road. With the cooperation between the nations, the road is maintained and developed. As such, Kaśyñāna has become the center of trade and one of the largest cities in the east. The walls were planted by the gargoyles and have been maintained to this day. The streets are filled with felines and Liberes, and temples are filled with Sancta and Inasa, debating the distinctions between the Lateran faith and the Inasa doctrine. At the center of the city, the bell resides. Its shape is familiar to Nymph, the soul furnace, or something similar. 4 statues surround the furnace: Furnaceside, the first king of the Sarkaz; Guldul, the city maker; Sarkaz, the sun wielder; and of course, Kaśjñāna, the wrathful Cruelian flame. Atop the Enlightened One's head rests the black crown of the Sarkaz. The Sarkaz legend of the Firestarter's betrayal tells the story of how the 3 Sarkaz king following Furnaceside betrayed and killed each other. The same thing happened in this world. However, as this Kaśjñāna had achieved enlightenment, he did not perish as he did in history. With the power of the crown, he has lived for millennia, and now the black crown is simply an identifier of the Enlightened One, having lost the meaning the Tikaz had given it. Entering the bell tower, it is exactly as Nymph remembers the soul furnace. However, Kaśjñāna does not see the walls of Orion and dainty originium lamps, but bright walls and reliefs sculpted by the Inasa. She has followed him to the center of the tower, where the Revenants and her friends should reside. Nymph asks Kaśjñāna for help returning to her Castle, and before they part ways, he offers her a story. When he awakened, he made a friend, a sage of a bygone age. The sage was unwilling and unable to eliminate calamity even when they deemed it the right thing to do. Having done all they could, they left Kaśjñāna to continue on with their work. Nymph does not understand why he would tell her this, so Kaśjñāna explains it simply. He can feel through his enlightenment that his world is made up by the words she tells the Revenants, but it does not matter to the Inasa. The reason she has remained here is because she feels guilty for creating these worlds, only to leave them. He tells her that should she bring the last worlds of his friends back to her world, she will have done more than enough to maintain the existence of the Inasa. After all, enlightenment comes when it is time. With that, Nymph can leave this world behind. Finally, the one you've been waiting for. On our journey through these fables, we've reached our climax. The well of imagination has been exhausted and Nymph is unable to think of a proper ending of this story. As such, she seeks the Revenants' advice and they tell her of the prophecy of Patriot. Cities devastated, Originium blanketing the land, and a black crown on her head, melting millions of lives into nothing but memories. The king of the Sarkaz enslaving all people. Searching for an ending to these fables, and combining it with the prophecy of Amiya ending the world, was probably not a great idea, and so, the end takes the form of Amiya. However, even within this story, Amiya poses a threat to the group, for she is ascended through Originium. In this world, Babel and Rhodes Island never existed. Kazdel was annihilated during Khalset's Great Crusade, and the Sarkaz were driven to extinction. As a child, Amiya was separated from her parents. A battle raged around her. Many allied nations fought against the Sarkaz remnants. During the battle, Amiya finds a mortally wounded, pink-haired Sarkaz, and being the wonderful young girl she is, wants to help her. A black crown floated above her head. The woman looks upon the scrapes on Amiya's arms, and before Amiya can help her, asks her if it hurts. When soldiers approached the pair, they saw an unforgivable sin, a normal person helping a devil. Even though she had just met the girl, Teresa protected Amiya and implanted the Sarkaz crown within her. When Amiya awoke, she was in her parents' arms. The conflict had long ceased, and no trace of her savior was found. That was the last bit of kindness ever done to and by the Sarkaz. There were no more, and with their common enemy destroyed, the allied nations descended into chaos once more. Soon, the Sarkaz were reborn. No, they aren't actually Sarkaz, but a common enemy everyone hates is a perfect name for those that must be killed. Starting with small countries, and moving on to the bigger ones, genocide came for all. An unending cycle of branding and killing. Unity and peace would never exist so long as Sarkaz did. As an adult, Amiya became a doctor, traveling from war zone to war zone, saving all that she could. She helps reattach the arm of the mercenary Ace and tries to convince him to take better care of himself. Their conversation is interrupted by a nurse who requests Dr. Amiya's presence. Amiya arrives at a tent and only has time to tell everyone to evacuate as the infected man is on his last legs. She stays with him in his final moments, hearing his story and regrets. As his time reaches its end, he pushes her away. Crying despite herself, she leaves him with a paper foul beast before taking her leave, as crystals overcome the foul beast and rip it apart. Returning to the quarantine zone, she witnesses soldiers setting fire to a tent. They will stop the spread of the Sarkaz, the spread of infection. The gates of hell open, and death rains down upon doctors, patients, and mercenaries indiscriminately. Ace saves her from the bombing, but was killed in the attempt. Looking to the sky, Amiya witnesses both sides shelling her camp. When the bombardment stopped, she tried to continue her work, but terror denied her. There was only death on this battlefield, and Amiya was left to weep through a river of blood. Many years later, Amiya was assigned to a special ops squad and would accompany them as they searched for a weapon to end the war. Amiya only realized this after searching through countless ruins and finding herself deep underground. Beneath Columbia, in the Hall of Stasis, they would find what Columbia sought. Amiya's squad was ambushed by Columbians, and Amiya would be sent to activate what they found so that negotiations might be held. Trevor Friston was awakened. Within her, he saw Originium and Civilizatona. A sarcophagus rose up beside Amiya, and Friston bid Amiya to enter. It was her only chance to live, and she took it. Crawling inside the sarcophagus, her consciousness faded away. Within the sarcophagus, Amiya is changed. Her, the crown, and Originium become one. She looks across the land and sees sickness, war, famine, catastrophe, greed, and hatred. Before her, two silent gods appear. One offers her a warm, gentle light, and the other a shell of black stone. One offers her hope, and the other freedom from pain. She rejects both, and arises from the sarcophagus with full authority of Civilizatona and administration access for Originium. Friston asks her if she found an answer that would offer salvation, but Amiya simply phrases him in Originium. Stasis is the answer Amiya has come to. Friston goes silent, and Amiya spreads her salvation. Across Terra she travels, infected become encased in Originium and remain as such for eternity. At first, people treated it as a mutation and continued their endless wars. Eventually, it becomes undeniable that this is no natural phenomenon. Across battlefields, all those about to die, infected or not, turn to stone. Soon they find her, the black-crowned Katus, the last Sarkaz. Amiya just wanted to save lives, and yet she's become public enemy number one. All of Terra unites against her. Amiya's efforts to save the dying have turned the fever up on Terra, and suffering spreads as fast as her salvation. So she makes her decision. If Terra will not end its suffering, she will end Terra. Sealing her world away in Originium, she brings her story to a close. Floating in the void, her story revolves around her crown as a moon. Stars spread around her, and she floats towards them to see if they will provide an answer to how to end conflict. What she finds is more and more suffering. With the help of Oracle, Kazdil is propelled to new heights. They resolve Terra's energy crisis and make the flying city of Kazdil a reality. All that remains is breaching the star pod. Before that event may happen, Amiya appears before them and absorbs all the energy generated by their experiment. She proclaims the doom of the Sarkaz should the star pod burst, but Teresa's disagrees and the two do battle. Teresa's, even as a Sarkaz king, is no match for this avatar of Originium and falls before her onslaught. Following the fall of Teresa's, Amiya comes face to face with the Doctor, who immediately recognizes that she's not of this world. Amiya questions why they would aid this world, and the Doctor tells her that they simply respect their desire for a better future, free from strife. Amiya has seen the end of this world, and has come to be its end. Upon learning this, the Doctor accepts being sealed away by her. Having sealed this world, Amiya plans to move on, only to be approached by Teresa. Despite having accepted their fate, the Doctor saved Teresa to allow for this meeting. Teresa is saddened by the sight of this Amiya, and wishes to seal her away alongside her world. The two fight for control over Originium, and both understand it is kindness that drives the other. However, in the end, Teresa's story comes to an end, and Amiya continues on. Realizing that the Pope has gone mad, Bloodrocksteed has Yelena join up with Calcid's group to escape Kazdil. Calcid, however, leads the group deep underground to hopefully find salvation. Bloodrocksteed, meanwhile, confronts the Pope alone. The Pope, unsurprised by his betrayal, asks the Gun Knight if he knows what the term Sarkaz means. It is those who deny their kin, those without a home. Originium will save them from that fate, however. Kazdil will be a home to these Sarkaz. Bloodrocksteed has heard enough, however, and takes up his halberd. Underground, Calcid leads her group to a sarcophagus. Calcid hopes the one within may prove to be their salvation, however only black eggshells remain within. In the cathedral, Bloodrocksteed attempts to end the life of the Pope, only for Originium to sprout in his defense. Undeterred, Bloodrocksteed readies himself and attacks again, this time striking him down, and as a result, he becomes a fallen Tikaz. However, the spread of Originium is not halted by the Pope's death. Amiya suddenly appears before Bloodrocksteed. He hears his own voice, more raspy and closer to death, to echo between them. The prophecy of Patriot floats above him. Amiya tells him that he has made a terrible mistake by killing the Pope, but she will forgive him. Bloodrocksteed looks upon the end of his world and tries to roar against fate one last time. However, Amiya freezes this world in Originium. Her salvation is come, and this world's fate fails it. The Enlightened One and the King of the Sarkaz meet centuries after Nymph leaves this world. The world is still lush with life, but no one walks the streets of Kaśyñāna. Even the storms that threaten the region are no more. Lotus flowers surround the tranquil scene, and the two who have met through the crown finally sit across from each other. The girl's ragged appearance is completely out of place in this tranquil place. Amiya asks Kaśyñāna if this silence was what he envisioned enlightenment as. Although this land is peaceful, it is devoid of life. It is an existence she cannot accept. Kaśyñāna sighs, the crown of the Sarkaz floating above his head. He accepts the intervention of Amiya. His vision for the Sarkaz was flawed, but he is not fazed by this revelation. He has passed the hope of his dream to another, and he hopes that in the world that created him, it may bear fruit. He apologized to Amiya for not being able to help her on her quest. Although she has not found the ending she seeks, she promises to continue on until she does, no matter the suffering she experiences. Kaśyñāna wishes her well on her journey before his story is sealed by Amiya. The bell sounds one last time, but none in this world will ever hear it again. Their stories become moons floating around her head, and eventually she finds the storytellers. Stories emerge as they travel, and she will put a stop to it. They would either be utterly defeated in battle, or suddenly vanish after making a choice. Their willingness to give up results in stories disappearing into the void. She follows behind them, and cleans up the stories they leave behind. Eventually, she and the storytellers make contact, and they are forced to do battle. Should they fail, they will be sealed along with this story. They may be the authors, but Amiya is stronger than any of them. Nymph manages to forge a key from her defiant thoughts and pushes Amiya back. Although uninjured by the fight, Amiya smiles at Nymph. Amiya encases Nymph with Originium and sends her and the others back to reality. Left alone in the void, she seals everything. No longer will the storytellers expand on these tales. Their time of growth has come to an end, and Amiya awaits the end of her reality. Perhaps, somewhere in the world of the storytellers, someone saved her when she needed it, and from that emotion is born an image of one most familiar. She gives her blessing to her savior, and prays that they will respond to her before the end. The doctor's kind words soothe Amiya to sleep, and close the book of her tale. Following the renovation of the Faunus syndrome fades away. Nymph still dreams of these stories, however, of twin kings and an angel patriot, of an enlightened Sarkaz and a girl in white. Nymph, however, knows what the dreams mean, that all stories come to an end. She fears that the revenants have taken root within her, but neither Sarkaz witchcraft or Babel doctors can cure her. She, however, happens to pass by the doctor and Amiya one day. Seeing Amiya smile at the progress of Kazdil reminds her of the girl in white. However, this time, the one who saved her stands by her side. This Amiya is not alone. Seeing Nymph has fallen into a dream, Amiya uses her arts to awaken her. Amiya offers to treat her, but Nymph refuses. and since seeing Amiya and the Doctor together, she's never again seen that girl in white. And that, my friends, is Sarkaz's Furnaceside Fables. It's probably the best integrated strategy story that we have gotten. Not because the others are bad or anything, but because this one really plays off the roguelike element and different endings to make a story that really could only be told in an integrated strategy setting. This is especially obvious with the final ending, where God King Amiya decides she's going to just put a stop to the stories so no more stories are told. Which is a pretty meta point to move into Integrated Strategy 6. I really don't have much to say on this series of events because, well, it's just hype moments and aura for real, for real. No, I get it. People loved seeing this version of Amiya that was like this basically unstoppable force, but for me it was always just hype moments and aura. Our Amiya might not be as strong as this Amiya, but she's vastly more interesting from a character standpoint. The only interesting thing about this Amiya is that it's basically a amalgamation of the Doctor and Priestess's ideals, but rolled into someone who probably shouldn't be given all the power in the universe. Regardless, I support Amiya's rights and wrongs. And yeah, I'm going to keep this outro brief. I did rearrange the endings of all of the events so that they all played out after the Impeccable Day story. I think it just worked well. However, if you didn't think it worked well, I'm actually entirely open to you telling me that down below. I wanted to make it more of a narrative experience, and doing that in this order really, in my mind, helps seal off these stories. Especially as the final endbooks of every single other ending all had something to do with Amiya. And with that said, shout out to the wonderful members of the factory. You are the mysterious, beautiful Sarkaz, or in this case, Sancta, that lures me in when I should know better. You're all truly wonderful. Y'all be good people, and I will see you in the next one. Listen, is it a hot take to say the Sancta woman is just not as attractive as the Sarkaz woman that's been abusing us these last few integrated strategies? I hope not.